Welcome to Gold and Boer, everybody, home of the college football fan. And don't forget about the checklist. Hat check, sunglasses check, Pepsi check, notes check, sources check, and thick skin is a check. And don't forget to send gear to represent your team and yourself in my background. Send it to P.O. Box 360, Liberty, South Carolina, 29657, and get yourself a shout out. On to the next video. Hey, you already know what time it is, so might as well sit down, brace yourself, and buckle up because you are entering the speculation zone. In case you're wondering, these are the teams that we don't have represented for the mini helmets. As you can see, we actually have quite a few big brands that's not represented here at Gold and Boer. So get your team represented here on Gold and Boer. Today's a big day for the Pac-12. It's actually a massive day for the Pac-12. I'm starting to hear reports that the Pac-12 TV deal is done. The numbers are there. They're done. Now it's time for the teams to figure out if they like the deal on the table. Because remember, it's one thing to have a TV deal. It's another thing to get all the teams to sign the grant of rights. So if the Pac-12 wants to stay together, then all these teams, or at least a large majority of these teams, need to like this TV deal enough to sign the grant of rights. I don't think it's going to be enough for everybody to sign. I do think that the majority of the Pac-12 will sign this grant of rights. And then there's the expansion idea. So I've maintained that I think the Pac-12 knows it's about to lose some members. They're talking to San Diego State, they're talking to Colorado State, SMU, and a possible fourth mystery school. San Diego State, I'm good with. That makes sense. You're recovering some of that Southern Cal TV market lost by USC and UCLA off to the Big Ten. So San Diego State to the Pac-12 makes a lot of sense. But talking to Colorado State and SMU, that really doesn't make sense. And who's this fourth mystery team? Could it be Fresno State? I think it could be. It would make a lot of sense. That's a second California market to kind of help soften the blow by losing USC and UCLA. But who is that fourth mystery team? I don't know. Could it be Tulane? Could it be Rice? Could it be Boise State? As big of a stretch as that is, the Pac-12 is in desperate times right now. I do think the Pac-12 loses at least 2 members in this go-around. And remember what I said yesterday. The Arizona president came out and said, nobody's going to make a move until we see this TV deal. Well, it seems like this TV deal is done, so everybody knows the numbers. And now the Arizona president is saying, yes, we are talking to the Big 12. So maybe it's been decided this TV deal is not good enough. We are going to talk to the Big 12, even though we already have been. And we're going to really think about joining the Big 12. And in fact, we will join the Big 12. It's just a process. This was a big-time step that needed to happen as far as the TV deal actually done. They see the numbers, and then do the team sign the grant of rights? It looks like Arizona has seen the numbers, and they don't like the numbers, and they're ready to get out of the Pac-12. Next question is, what about Colorado? Are they okay with the numbers, or are they going to jump to the Big 12 as well? And the biggest question is, how long will these grant of rights be if these teams do decide to sign this grant of rights? I'm hearing that Oregon and Washington only want to sign a grant of rights up to 3 years. They want to keep their options open. They know that the Big Ten could potentially be interested in them, and they don't want to have to pay a lot of money to get out of the Pac-12 into the Big Ten. Something to keep your eyes on. The length of the grant of rights. So it's not only signing these grant of rights or getting these teams to sign the grant of rights, but can you get them to sign an extended grant of rights? I don't think that happens at all. I do think a large majority of the Pac-12 will sign the grant of rights, but I don't think it will be an extended grant of rights. I think we're going to be looking at a 3 to 5 grant of rights. And Oregon and Washington might have an out clause for the Big Ten. Who knows? The Big 12 offered them a contract where they had an out clause. So maybe the Pac-12 could do the same thing to try to keep them as long as possible. Who knows with that situation? And I also did a previous video today detailing the different scenarios where Arizona and Arizona State could get split up. Because I think they will get split up no matter what. Unless Arizona State comes to their senses in the future and goes to the Big 12, I think these two universities will get split up. There is no legislation intact where it would keep these teams together. I thought there was possible legislation that keeps these two teams together as far as wherever Arizona is, Arizona State must be, and wherever Arizona State is, Arizona must be. That doesn't exist. And I do think that they will get split up. Even if it's just for a few years, I think they get split up. My biggest question is it possible that Fox and ESPN are actually working together to try to get these teams at a lower cost? I think that's definitely possible. Now, the media deal that we're hearing is going to be streaming heavy for the Pac-12. We're talking Apple TV and Amazon carrying the majority of this TV deal with a little bit of ESPN. Remember, a lot of people use this argument, well, it's valuable to ESPN because they need that Pac-12 after dark. They don't need the Pac-12 after dark. They just need content after dark. So whether the teams are in the Pac-12 or in the Big 10 or the Big 12 or even the SEC, maybe even the ACC, I don't know. Doesn't matter where they're at. They just need content for that time slot. Doesn't have to be PAC 12 after dark. Really hasn't done that great anyways. Maybe you could actually get better matchups in that after dark time slot if these teams are in other conferences. So you really can't use that excuse because it doesn't matter what conferences these teams are in, they could still fill that time slot. So Fox, ESPN works together. Let's say that's happening, right? Fox has Tier 1 rights in both the Big 10 and the Big 12. ESPN has Tier 2 rights in both the Big 12 and the Big 10. Let's say the Big 10 gets Washington, Oregon, Stanford, and Cal, and then the rest of the Pac 12, because they don't like this TV deal, it doesn't stay intact, goes to the Big 12. Oregon State, Washington State, Utah, Colorado, Arizona State, they go to the Big 12. So boom, you just split up the Pac-12, right? Well, that helps Fox tremendously, and it helps ESPN a little bit. So maybe the consensus is, hey, we help you to split up the Pac-12, ESPN talking to Fox. Now we need something in return. What they could get in return is Oklahoma State and West Virginia to the SEC. And there have been murmurs and rumors that the SEC is interested in Oklahoma State and West Virginia. It all depends on the ACC. The SEC does want some brands out of the ACC. The Big 10 also wants some brands out of the ACC. And the Big 12 could get some of the leftovers of the ACC and they still be valuable. But let's say the ACC actually stays intact. Those granted rights aren't breakable and they're stuck in the ACC until 2036. Well, their next best option is to turn their eyes on the Big 12 and get Oklahoma State and West Virginia. Now, with Oklahoma State, you're not grabbing a footprint in a new state, but you are locking down Bedlam, and Oklahoma State is a good brand in the Big 12. You would be hurting the Big 12 slightly by getting these two brands. Remember, the Big 12 is getting all these brands of the Pac-12, so you're not decimating the Big 12, but you are hurting them slightly. So with Oklahoma State, you're locking down Bedlam. Oklahoma State has a large endowment. They have a large fan base as well. You would have some financial gain by grabbing Oklahoma State. With West Virginia, that's a new team in a new state as far as the footprint goes. So West Virginia does carry some value for the SEC. Remember, the last go-around, before they got Oklahoma and Texas, it came down to Texas A&M, Missouri, or West Virginia. The SEC actually wanted Texas A&M and West Virginia, but ESPN was like, whoa. No, we want that Kansas City, St. Louis TV market. Give us Missouri, and the SEC took Missouri. So the SEC has shown some interest in West Virginia in the past. I think this would be a smart move if they know that they can't get any teams from the ACC until 2036. And the SEC would most certainly want to react if the Big 10 expands. If the Big 10 expands, then the SEC is also going to want to expand. And if ESPN helps Fox to split up the Pac-12, they're going to need some concessions. And one of those concessions could be getting West Virginia and Oklahoma State to the SEC out of the Big 12. In other words, we help you split up the Pac-12. Now we need a little bit of a reward for doing that. We're going to take two of your best brands remaining out of the current Big 12, and that's West Virginia and Oklahoma State. You still get all those teams out of the Pac-12. So I don't think it's asking much by asking for Oklahoma State and West Virginia, and boom, that's how they could get Oklahoma State and West Virginia into the SEC. Listen, ESPN is not going to help Fox unless Fox helps the ESPN in return. So that could be the you scratch my back and I'll scratch your back situation as far as ESPN helping Fox to split up the Pac-12 and then Fox helping ESPN to get a couple teams out of the Big 12. And then in the future, whenever the ACC does either vote to dissolve the grant of rights or they last until 2036, and then teams are like, no, we're not signing the grant of rights, we're going to go where we want to go. That's when the SEC can grab Clemson, the Miami Hurricanes, NC State, and Virginia Tech. I think that's the best combination for the SEC. It makes the most sense. Footprints in new states, big-time brands. The SEC is good to go. And don't forget, they got Oklahoma State and West Virginia from the Big 12. So they would also be locking in the Black Diamond Trophy rivalry between West Virginia and Virginia Tech. So you got a new state in West Virginia. You got a new state in Virginia Tech. You got a new state in NC State. And then you're adding powerful brands in Clemson and Miami Hurricanes. For the Big 10, they would get Georgia Tech, Duke with North Carolina probably, maybe not, but probably, and then Virginia. So you're locking down the state of North Carolina with Duke and North Carolina. You get a footprint in the state of Virginia and a footprint in the state of Georgia. Now, if they don't bring in Duke with North Carolina, which is also a possibility, that's when they get Florida State. Florida State will not be left out of this. If the Big 10 grabs Duke and North Carolina together, then the SEC will dump somebody for Florida State, possibly the Miami Hurricanes. Florida State will go to either the SEC or the Big 10. But I think the Big 10 will want Florida State. Florida State is pursuing AAU status. I think the Big 10 could pull some strings because they do have some pull in the AAU. So they get Florida State AAU status, and boom, they get Florida State, Georgia Tech, North Carolina, not Duke, and Virginia. 4 strong brands, 4 new states, and the Big Ten is coast to coast and border to border. So there you go. That's how I think Fox and ESPN could work together to take down the Pac-12 and also work together in the future to take down the ACC and split it evenly. And I know, ESPN has a good deal with the ACC. Why would they want that to go away? So the most plausible scenario is the ACC still lasts until 2036, and then they split it up evenly. And don't forget about the Big 12. I think the Big 12 gets Syracuse, Pitt, Louisville, and either Virginia Tech if they're available, or NC State if they're available. Whichever one of those two teams the SEC doesn't pick up, that's who the Big 12 would pick up. So I think Fox and ESPN works together now to split up the Pac-12. I also think they work together in the future to split up the ACC once the grant of rights are over with, and ESPN knows that they can't get one over on the ACC like they just did. So y'all let me know in the comment section. Number 1, do you think ESPN and Fox could be working together in on all this to get these teams for cheaper? I think it's a real possibility. Number 2, if you do think they're working together, do you think the Pac-12 gets split in half? 4 of them go to the Big 10, the other 6 go to the Big 12? Or do you think it's some other combination? Maybe some teams actually remain in the Pac-12, who knows? And then ESPN requires a little bit of a kickback. Hey, we helped you split up the Pac-12. Now we need West Virginia and Oklahoma State, the SEC. And finally, number 3, do you think in the future ESPN and Fox could also work together to divvy up the ACC between the two networks? That's all I got for this show. Like and subscribe if you haven't already, and I'll see you on my next show.